Hi, I'm Katie Hacker, your host. Today we stitch our way to beautiful detailing. Take a look at this bracelet. The secret is using blanket stitch to keep all of your rows nice and evenly spaced across the cuff. So let me show you how to get started. I'm using thermally bonded beading thread. I have a leather cuff, and I've chosen some beautiful variegated color stones. I like the rondelle shape for this pattern. And I also use some 4mm rounds. You'll see I have antique brass, gunmetal color, and copper. And it's nice when they all come together on one strand and you can just kind of blend them in because it really matches the warmth of the stones. So what I'll do first is string this pattern onto my thread. Now I don't have a stopper here because I'm going to tie the ends together on the back of the bracelet. So you just want to be careful as you're doing the tie that you don't lose your beads off of the thread. So what you'll do is just tie a square knot here to get started. And that's over, under, and through. And then we'll do it in the other direction so that we can anchor the thread onto the cuff. And the beginning part of this stitch is probably the hardest part because once you get going with the pattern, it really does kind of stitch itself. So now I have a beading needle, and I'm going to pass through my beads one more time so that they're very well secured onto the cuff. And every time you go through the beads, you're going to do it twice. So you do want to be mindful and choose beads that can accommodate 2 passes of your needle and thread. All right, so we've got this strand attached to the bracelet. And now what we'll do is pick up, we're going to take 6 of our little metal faceted cubes. So this could be any type of bead here. 4mm and 3mm beads work really well. And what you'll do is bring them down your thread, and without catching it here, we're just going to string it again to the back of the bracelet. So we'll just whip this thread right around and go through the row. Our next row is when the actual blanket stitch will begin. So bring your needle all the way through the row. Pull your thread. Now, I'm using a shorter piece than I would ordinarily use for this project. You're going to want about 3 yards of thread. Now, when you go around the back side of the bracelet, this is where you pick up your blanket stitch. So see how I have a little loop of thread right here? I'm just going to catch that with my needle and then do the next row. So catch the threads and then go to the next row, like that. And this type of stitch is helpful because it does really anchor your beads into place. This movement here is happening because I really need to tie this in a tight knot and add a drop of glue. Okay, so for the next pass, you're going to pick up your beading pattern again, only this time I'm going to reverse it. So I have antique brass, hematite, and then copper. This time I'll take hematite and a jasper rondelle. You could use quartzite, you could use glass rondelles, you could use anything here. It would be just as pretty. Then pass through your copper, take another rondelle and another metal bead. And this time I'll pick up antique brass and I'll whip around the bracelet like this, and then through my strand again. And then on my next pass is when I'll catch this loop with my blanket stitch. So bring your needle through all of your beads and then down. See, I have my loop here. I'm going to pick it up for my next row. So this is how you start your blanket stitch. Then you'll repeat all of your rows across the bracelet. And when you get to the end, let me take a look at the finished one here. I'm just going to flip it to the edge. Can you see how all the stitching is going along the top of your bracelet cuff here? And this is really holding the beads in place. And see how I can even, when you're wearing this too, it's important that those are nice and anchored down. Otherwise, they're going to slide around a lot. So you're going to keep a very tight tension as you're making that blanket stitch around the cuff. Now the other edge doesn't have that loop. It just has this double strands of thread. It's kind of hard to see because they're black, but you see the idea is that you have each of them fairly evenly spaced. And you have a pretty neat and tidy backside as well. I had to add an extra piece of thread here, so I tied it together and added a drop of glue. And then at the end, all you'll do to finish is tie your ends in a nice knot. And one little tip, you might notice a difference about the leather cuffs here. This one has our plain shiny snap. This one I added a snap cover, and that's just a way that you can customize any type of store-bought bracelet by adding your own snap covers. And to do that, you would use industrial strength thread. So take a look at these different rondelles and how beautiful they are. I think that you can use so many different kinds of beads to create this same beautiful bracelet. You've got stone, ceramic, glass. And when you do add thread glue, you always want to think about glue that's flexible. So choose a glue that is especially made for jewelry and make sure that it's flexible enough, especially when you're working with leather, because you're going to be wearing this a lot and taking it on and off. That glue has to be secure but flexible enough to withstand the push and pull of taking the bracelet on and off. And one more tip about beading thread too is using that thermally bonded beading thread, especially for a bracelet like this where you're passing through your beads more than once. It isn't able to be pierced with a needle. So because you're passing through several times, it is very helpful to use that type of beading thread. And always use the largest size of beading thread that will be best for the holes size in your beads. So like I said, you're going through those beads twice. You want to be sure that you have a thickness of thread that will be able to be accommodated by the hole sizes on your beads. So when you're finished, you can tie those ends and glue it, and you have a beautiful cuff bracelet. You'll wear it every day.